I never imagined I'd be excited about a minimum wage job. Stocking shelves at a grocery store wasn't exactly glamorous, but when I saw the ad in our local paper, it felt like I'd hit the jackpot. The pay was surprisingly good, $18 an hour, way above the minimum wage, and the night shift hours fit perfectly with my school schedule. It seemed like the solution to all my problems. Night stalker needed at Freddy's Fresh Foods, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., $18 an hour. No experience required, must work independently. I should have known it was too good to be true. But when you're desperate for money, you ignore the red flags. Mom had been on my case to get a job to help with the bills, and I needed cash for college applications. So the very next day, I drove down to Freddy's Fresh Foods to apply. The store was a rundown relic on the edge of town. I'd driven past it 1,000 times, but never had a reason to go inside. Its faded sign and flickering neon lights didn't exactly scream fresh foods, but beggars can't be choosers. When I stepped inside, the first thing that hit me was the smell, a nauseating mix of rotting vegetables and something metallic. I swallowed back the urge to gag and made my way to the customer service desk. Behind it stood Mr. Freddy himself, I guessed. He was an old man with thinning gray hair, thick glasses, and a permanent scowl etched into his face. He barely glanced at my application before grumbling, "You start tonight." His voice was raspy, like he'd been chain-smoking since birth. "Be here at 9:45 sharp. I'll go over the rules then." It was odd he didn't mention any training, but I wasn't about to argue. I needed this job, weird or not. That night, when I pulled into the parking lot at 9:45, the place looked even more unsettling in the dark. The only car in sight was an old rusty pickup truck that I assumed was his. The flickering open sign in the window barely glowed, giving the entire store an eerie vibe. Mr. Freddy was waiting at the front door, keys jingling in his bony hand. He let me in quickly and locked the door behind us. Then, he handed me a folded piece of paper. "These are the rules," he said, his voice low and grave. "Memorize them. Follow them exactly. Your life depends on it." I laughed nervously, thinking he was joking, but his eyes, a pale, watery gray, bored into mine with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "I'm not joking, kid," he snapped. "Break these rules, and I can't guarantee your safety. Understand?" I nodded slowly, a lump forming in my throat. This didn't feel like a grocery store job anymore. It felt like I'd signed up for something much worse. "Good," he said, shoving the paper into my hand. "I'll be back at 6 a.m. to unlock the doors. Don't try to leave before then. The alarms are set." And just like that, he was gone, leaving me alone in the dimly lit store. I unfolded the paper with trembling hands and began to read the rules. Rule 1. Always keep the main lights on. If they go out, go to the break room immediately and stay there until they come back on. Rule 2. Do not enter the walk-in freezer. Ever. Rule 3. If you hear singing, hide immediately. Stay hidden until it stops. Rule 4. Do not acknowledge or interact with any children you see in the store. Rule 5. If you find an item on the floor that wasn't there before, leave it alone. Don't pick it up. Don't move it. Rule 6. Do not leave the store before 6 a.m. I stared at the list, my heart pounding in my chest. What kind of rules were these? It had to be a prank, right? Some twisted hazing ritual for new employees? But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The fear in Mr. Freddy's voice had been far too real. "It's fine," I whispered to myself. "Just follow the rules, and you'll be okay." I tried to focus on the task at hand, stocking shelves. It wasn't hard work, just mind-numbing. For the first hour, everything seemed normal. The store was eerily quiet, the only sounds the faint hum of the lights and the occasional beep from the refrigerators. But then, as I was restocking cereal on aisle 4, I heard it. A soft, melodic humming. It started faint, like it was coming from far away, but it grew louder with every passing second. My blood ran cold as rule number 3 flashed in my mind. If you hear singing, hide immediately. I dropped the box of cereal and bolted to the next aisle, crouching behind a display of paper towels. My heart pounded so hard I was sure it would give me away. The singing grew closer, the tune strange and dissonant, making the hairs on my arms stand on end. Footsteps followed, slow, deliberate, unhurried. They stopped at the end of my aisle. I held my breath, praying that whatever it was wouldn't find me. Squeezed my eyes shut, holding my breath as the eerie singing and slow footsteps echoed through the store. My body was frozen in fear, praying that whatever was out there wouldn't come down my aisle. After what felt like an eternity, the sounds finally began to fade. Once silence returned, I waited a few extra moments before daring to move. My legs were trembling so badly I could barely stand. What the hell had just happened? Part of me wanted to run straight to the break room and lock myself in until morning, but I couldn't afford to lose this job. I forced myself to take a few deep breaths and return to work. But every creak, every groan of the old building now felt sinister. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see something, or someone, lurking behind me. At around 2 a.m., I was in the dairy section when I heard a loud thump from inside the walk-in freezer. My heart dropped as rule number 2 flashed through my mind. Do not enter the walk-in freezer for any reason. Thump, thump, thump. It sounded like something, or someone, was trying to get out. My imagination spiraled, conjuring terrifying images of what could be behind that door. Suddenly, I heard a voice, muffled, but unmistakable. Hello? Is anyone there? Please help me. I'm trapped in here. It was a woman's voice, shaking with desperation. Please, she cried, her voice breaking. I can't feel my fingers anymore. I'm going to freeze to death. I stood there, frozen in place, torn between instinct and the rules. If someone really was trapped inside, how could I just walk away? But what if it wasn't real? What if this was a test? I'm begging you, the voice sobbed, barely audible now. Please, help me. My chest tightened with panic. I couldn't take it anymore. Against my better judgment, I reached for the freezer door handle. The cold metal stung my fingers as soon as I touched it. And then, click. Every light in the store went out, plunging me into pitch-black darkness. My hand shot back as if I'd been burned. Rule number 1. If the lights go out, go to the break room immediately and don't come out until they're back on. Heart pounding, I turned and ran through the darkened aisles, my hands outstretched to feel my way. Behind me, I could hear faint rustling, like something moving in the shadows. I didn't dare look back. Finally, I found the break room door and threw myself inside, slamming it shut behind me. I collapsed in the corner, shaking and crying, as I waited for what felt like hours. When the lights finally flickered back on, I hesitated before leaving the safety of the break room. Everything outside looked normal. The freezer door was closed, the aisles were undisturbed, and the eerie stillness of the store had returned. But I knew better now. This place was anything but normal. The rest of the night passed in a blur of paranoia and dread. Every sound made me jump, every shadow felt like a threat. By the time 6 a.m. rolled around, I was a complete wreck. Mr. Freddy arrived right on time. He unlocked the door and gave me a once-over, noting my pale face and trembling hands. You made it, he said, nodding approvingly. Good job, kid. See you tonight. I wanted to quit right then and there, but I needed the money. And deep down, a morbid curiosity pulled me back. What else could this place be hiding? So I came back the next night, and the night after that. Each shift brought new horrors. One night, I saw a little girl skipping down one of the aisles. She looked so real, so normal. But I remembered rule number 4. Do not acknowledge or interact with any children you see in the store. I ignored her, even when she started crying, pleading for me to help her find her mom. Another night, around 3 a.m., someone began pounding on the front door. This is the police, a man's voice called out. You need to open the door right now. My hand froze on the mop I was holding. Rule number 6. Do not leave the store before 6 a.m. I stayed put, my heart racing as the man's voice grew louder, angrier. "If you don't open this door, I'll break it down," he shouted. But I didn't move. When Mr. Freddy arrived at 6 a.m., the door was intact and the parking lot was empty. "You're still here," he said, looking surprised. "Good. You're learning." I wanted to ask him about the police, the singing, the girl, but something in his expression warned me against it. As the weeks went on, I got better at following the rules. I learned to trust my instincts, to recognize when something wasn't right. But no matter how careful I was, the horrors didn't stop. In fact, they were getting worse. One night, about a month into the job, I was restocking the canned goods aisle when I heard it again. The singing. That damn singing again. My heart sank as the haunting melody floated through the air. Without thinking, I ducked behind a stack of boxes, holding my breath. The sound grew louder, closer, until it was right at the end of my aisle. Then it stopped. I stayed frozen, not daring to move. Seconds felt like hours. My pulse thundered in my ears as I waited. Finally, summoning every ounce of courage, I slowly peeked around the edge of the boxes. There was nothing there. I let out a shaky breath, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. False alarm, right? As I turned to get back to work, I noticed something on the floor that hadn't been there before. A small red ball. Rule number 5 echoed in my mind. If you see an item on the floor that wasn't there before, do not touch it or try to put it back. The ball looked innocent, harmless even. But I knew better now. Nothing in this store was innocent. I should have left it alone. I should have followed the rules. But curiosity got the better of me. My hand moved on its own, reaching down to pick it up. As soon as my fingers touched it, the ball burst open, releasing a thick black liquid that coated my hand. The pain was immediate. It burned like acid, and I screamed, trying to shake it off. But the goo clung to me, spreading up my arm like it was alive. Panic set in as I desperately tried to scrape it off, but it was no use. And then I heard it. The singing. I turned around and froze in terror. Standing behind me was something. It was almost human, but grotesquely wrong. Its limbs were unnaturally long, its sickly gray skin stretched taut over a thin frame. Its face was a nightmare. Empty black sockets where eyes should have been, and a mouth full of sharp, glistening teeth. It opened its mouth and the haunting song poured out, louder and more chilling than before. I did the only thing I could think of. I ran. I sprinted for the front door, fumbling with the lock, but it wouldn't budge. My hands were slick with the black goo, making it impossible to get a grip. I was trapped. The singing grew louder, closer. The thing was right behind me. Desperation took over, and I turned, running as fast as I could toward the break room. It was the only place I thought I might be safe. I slammed the door shut behind me just as the creature reached it. It pounded on the door with inhuman strength, the whole room shaking with each blow. Its song turned to shrieks, a horrible mix of anger and triumph. I collapsed in the corner, sobbing and praying for 6 a.m. to come. The pounding continued, relentless, but then, silence. The sudden stillness was almost worse. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I stayed huddled in the corner, afraid to even look at the door. Finally, I heard the front door unlock. "Kid, you in here?" Mr. Freddy's voice called out. I stumbled out of the break room, shaking uncontrollably. Mr. Freddy took one look at me and sighed. "You broke the rules, didn't you?" he said, his voice laced with disappointment. I nodded, too scared to speak. I held up my hand, still coated in that black, corrosive goo. He shook his head. "I warned you. I told you how important they were." "What? What was that thing?" I managed to whisper. "You don't want to know," he said grimly. "Just be grateful you made it to the break room in time. Others haven't been so lucky." That was it. I was done. No job, no amount of money was worth this. As I walked to the door, Mr. Freddy stopped me. "Listen, kid. he said, his tone deadly serious. What happens in Freddy's Fresh Foods stays in Freddy's Fresh Foods. You understand? I nodded, too terrified to argue. Good, he said. Because if you ever tell anyone about what goes on here, well, let's just say those things don't always stay in the store. They might come looking for you. I didn't need to be told twice. I quit that day and left town, putting as much distance as I could between me and Freddy's Fresh Foods. But the nightmares never stopped. 3 years later, I still wake up in a cold sweat, haunted by the memories of that place. The singing, the pounding on the door, those hollow black eyes. They're burned into my mind. Last week, something happened that made my blood run cold. I was walking home from my new job at a normal store in a normal town when I saw a small convenience store. There was a help wanted sign in the window, but it wasn't the sign that caught my attention. It was the name, Freddy's Fresh Foods. I froze, staring at the sign, my mind racing. It couldn't be. I had moved hundreds of miles away. There was no way it was the same store. But deep down, I knew. So if you ever see a job ad for Freddy's Fresh Foods, or any place like it, do yourself a favor. Don't apply. No matter how good the pay is, no matter how desperate you are. Some jobs aren't worth it. And some rules, they're meant to be followed. It was there, in the window, a tall, thin figure with wispy gray hair. Mr. Freddy. Our eyes met, and he smiled. Not a kind smile, but something slow and sinister. My heart dropped, and without thinking, I ran. I ran all the way home, locked my door, and huddled in my apartment. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't make a difference. They'd found me. As I sit here, writing this, I can hear it. The singing. Soft at first, but getting louder. Closer. I don't know what's going to happen to me. But before it's too late, I need to warn you. Freddy's Fresh Foods isn't just one store. It's spreading. If you see that name, or any job ad that feels too good to be true, run. Run as far as you can. Because once Freddy's Fresh Foods has its hooks in you, it never really lets go. The story of my time at Freddy's has spread online. Some say it's just a scary story, something made up for clicks. I wish it were. But for those of you who know, who've seen the signs, felt that chill when passing an eerily quiet store at night, you understand. And it's worse than I imagined. They're evolving. It's not just Freddy's anymore. I've heard whispers of other stores, Murphy's Market, Night Owl Foods, different names, same horrors. The rules are changing too. They're more complex, more subtle. Sometimes following one rule means breaking another, and the consequences are devastating. I've heard stories. People disappearing on their first shift, never seen again. Others make it out, but they're different, like something was taken from them. Or worse, like something new has been added. Last month I got a call from an old high school friend. He was thrilled about a new job at a 24-hour convenience store. The pay was great, perfect for his schedule. My stomach dropped as he described the interview, the strange questions, the focus on rules. I begged him not to take the job, told him my story. He laughed it off, said I'd been watching too many horror movies. 3 weeks later he disappeared. I tried calling, texting, even going to his apartment. Nothing. The store where he worked? It's gone. The building sits empty, a for lease sign in the window like it was never there. Now I can't shake the feeling that nowhere is safe. The patterns we're seeing. Since my last post, hundreds of people have reached out. Some called me crazy, but others had stories like mine. Together, we've pieced together a terrifying picture. It's not just grocery stores anymore. Gas stations, hotels, hospitals, places you wouldn't think twice about. Always the night shift. Always strange rules. Always terrible consequences. But the most chilling part? We think we figured out why they're doing this. They're recruiting. Survivors like me, those who make it through without disappearing or changing, are being tested. And if we pass, they come for us. Half of the people I've been working with have vanished. No warnings, no goodbyes. Just gone. The ones of us who remain are trying to fight back. We've started mapping these locations, warning people before they accept jobs. But it's like fighting a hydra. For every store we expose, 2 more seem to pop up. The signs to look for a store you've never heard of before. Oddly specific rules posted in employee handbooks or on walls. Job offers that seem too good to be true. Employees who won't make eye contact or seem off. And worst of all, the singing. If you hear singing, even faintly, leave. Don't stop. Don't look back. What comes next? I've started noticing strange things, symbols hidden in store logos, cryptic phrases in job ads that seem to have double meanings. It's like there's a secret world operating just beneath the surface of our reality. And sometimes, late at night, I hear it. The singing. It doesn't come from any one direction. It's everywhere at once. Soft, eerie, and impossible to ignore. I'm writing this as a final warning. If you're considering a night shift job at a store you've never heard of, don't do it. No matter how desperate you are, no matter how perfect it seems. Once you're in, you'll never truly escape. As for me, I'm running out of time. Every day it gets harder to tell what's real and what's paranoia. And I feel like they're closing in. If you've experienced something similar, reach out. Maybe together, we can find answers. But be careful who you trust. You never know who might already be one of them. And if you hear the singing, run, and don't look back. Because the night shift is calling. And this time, I don't think I'll escape. For every strange store or place we manage to shut down, 2 more pop up somewhere else. It's as if we're fighting a losing battle. And the more we dig, the more we're starting to realize just how deep this goes. Government officials turning a blind eye. Police reports mysteriously vanishing. Entire buildings disappearing without a trace. It's like there's a massive network protecting these places. But why? What's their purpose? What are they preparing for? We don't have all the answers yet, but we're determined to find them. A final warning. If you're reading this, please be careful. Don't take that night job, no matter how desperate you are. Don't step into that eerie store after dark, and if you ever hear singing, you know what to do. Run. They're watching me. As for me, I can feel them getting closer. Last night I woke up to find a small red ball sitting on my nightstand. The same kind of ball I saw back at Freddy's. I didn't touch it, I've learned that much. But when I came back from the bathroom, it was gone. They're taunting me now, reminding me that they can reach me wherever I go. The escape plan. I can't stay here any longer. Tonight, I'm leaving. I don't know where I'm going, but I can't let them catch me. I'll try to update if I can, but if you don't hear from me, just remember this. The night shift is always hiring, but some jobs are better left unfilled. Stay safe, don't break the rules, and whatever you do, don't lose. Because in this game, losing doesn't just mean you're fired, it means you're theirs. Forever. If enjoying this video, please subscribe my channel.